So I'm going to do two things here. This is a very dark image. You can see it up there pretty good. On my screen, I can't see his cowl and all that. It's getting lost. But if I came in here and I went, I'm going to unlock this. If I came in here and I went, I'm going to make a quick selection, so I think I can see it enough. Yeah. If I can't see something, one thing I do when I just want to make a selection is I'll make a new layer, and we're going to talk about this tool in a second. And I'm just going to lighten up this layer. I'm going to totally ruin this layer. It's not going to be usable. It doesn't matter. I'm going to throw it away. All I want to do is be able to see these edges. So I'm going to make a quick selection here. Getting a lot of glare on this. Oops. Oops. Actually, let's do this. Do this again. By the way, we're out on Monday. You guys know that, right? Which I'm never a big fan of. I want to go over here. It's hard to see where his cowl is at all. So I want to make two selections here. You can see I went out of the border there on the bottom part because it's just going to make a selection inside the border anyway, so I'm not that worried about it. Here's my work path. I'm going to go control click the little thumbnail. Yeah, that's not going to work. Let's try it this way. I'm going to keep it right to just his face in here. Let's just do that. That's better. Now I'm going to go select, and I'm going to go up here to select, save selection, face, because I don't want to reselect that again. Okay, now I'm going to get rid of this layer because remember that's the one I tweaked. And then I'm going to put a new layer on here, and I'm going to go. And by the way, again, when I put a color down first with the way they have the palette set up, it's going to be a screaming color. So I'm going to say maybe there's a little bit of light down here, uplighting him. I'm going to go to my gradient tool, foreground to transparent. And then I'm going to go to my layers. And that's actually not too bad there. I'm going to try a bunch of different things. That's not too bad. Just depends on how much I want it to blast a little bit. So I might blast a little bit and then pull it back. Could go with the cool. So that tells me if I go to subtract, I can get that nice cool. So I might use that. That's not too bad. I'm going to go there and I'm going to pull it back a little bit. And then I'm just going to put another layer because I like to be able to control these on their own layers. And I'm going to give it a little bit of blue light coming this way. And I know I can get a blue light if I go to subtract. Okay? So I'm automatically starting to get a nice warm, cool thing. That's weird. Why is it doing that? My hotkey's not working. Hang on. Oh, that's weird. Oh, there it goes. Okay, so we've automatically just started to colorize this thing. Does that make sense? Okay, so the reason I do this is because it's very desaturated here. It's a lot more dramatic on my screen. Oh, weird. I shouldn't walk away from the screen because I found that I had to edit all that out in the video. It's just a very quick way to start playing with these images, okay? Now I'm going to go and I'm going to take my selection, and I'm also just sort of trying to reiterate what we talked about last week. I'm going to make a new layer, and I'm going to go, actually let's make a new selection. So I'm going to go back to this one so I can see it again. And I'm going to go to my pen tool, and I'm going to select this. Like that, and I'm going to select this. Go back to my path, control click the little thumbnail. By the way, that control clicking the thumbnail will work on your layers, it'll work on your paths, it'll work on a lot of things. And we go back up here, turn this layer off again. I got my dramatic layer. I still got my red selected, and I'm going to go, because if there's light hitting him here from the bottom, I'm probably going to have light sweeping across that wall. And then now it becomes like, do I want a dramatic red? I kind of like the red. Let's try the subtract. Nah, it's not very dramatic. So this is sitting on almost black, so it's a little tricky. That's not too bad. Now, I could also do it where I go, I'm going to have it pretty hard light, and then I could come up here right there to my opacity, and I could pull that back. Does that make sense, you guys? Pretty simple, right? What you're going to see with all these layers and all this stuff is there's just a million things you can do with it, with everything, okay? Now, let's look at one other thing. Now, another thing I would do, by the way, is I'd probably put another layer on here. Maybe get a brush. And this is a little more advanced. Oops. Let's go to... what do I have these on? That's on subtract. Oh, that's on subtract. Let's try, yeah, color. That's what I want. So I want to put this one on color. And I could come in here and start to sort of paint in little things. I'm going to smudge this out so it's not so dramatic. And I could start bottom lighting things and all that kind of stuff and start really starting to throw the light around. Does that make sense? Yeah? Okay, so let's go. Now I'm going to try something else. Here's something else you can do with layers. I grabbed this paper texture off the web. It's probably going to be too small for this, but that's okay. And I'm going to use another tool we're going to talk about today here. Now it's got a touch of color to it. I might try that, but just for the sake of this, I want to go up to adjustments, and we'll talk about this in a minute. Hue saturation. I'm going to pull all the color out of it. Then I'm going to go back up here. See it now? This one I dragged in. You can see right there it turned into a smart object. Right click it, rasterize layer. Okay, so now I'm going to go back to my layers and see if I can find like a nice paper texture. So you can see it's starting to do trippy things with the overlay, okay? What I'm looking for is just, like, that's not too bad. See how it's really picking it up in the background? So it makes that a little more interesting. You're going to use this, you're going to use overlays like crazy with painting, with everything for the most part. They're really useful. Divide's not too bad, I kind of like that. Here's hue, just takes all the color out. So for me, divide's working okay. And then I might have to come back in here. No, it doesn't look that bad up there. Okay, does that make sense? So very easily, I can take an image, and you do this kind of stuff all the time, especially if you're a graphic designer. You might get an image, and you want to do something a little more dramatic with it, okay? They give me a black and white image, I'm actually happy because I can screw around with it quite a bit, okay? I can do something with color too, but this way I can do it. If I wanted to, and we'll talk about this in a minute, I'll talk about that in a minute. So I'm going to save this. So let's look at 3 really simple tools, or 4, or whatever. We're going to look at a couple of things. Actually, let's do this first. Okay, so here's a girl standing in a very complex background, right? We haven't talked about content aware yet, okay? So what we've been doing when we make a selection is we're going, here's my selection, edit, let's make this background color a color. We've been going edit, fill, and we either pick the foreground color, so there's my foreground color, or edit, fill, and we pick the background color, correct? So based on these 2 swatches right here, does that make sense? That's what we've been doing, yeah? Okay, so let's look at a different thing now. And we've also talked about, you know, selecting out a building and all that kind of stuff. So here's another way of doing this. And we've also talked about direct selection tool. So I'm going to go to just let's just try it with our marquee tool. And this is a stock image, that's why it's got a watermark on it. And now I'm going to go to the same place, edit, fill, only instead of the foreground and background color, I'm going to go content aware. And go, okay. Oh, I'm on the wrong layer. Edit, fill, content aware, and boom. It just gets rid of her, okay? That's a very complex background, okay? And with the human in it, which is also fairly complex. It works pretty damn good. It's not always going to work exactly right, but it works pretty darn good. You can see right there, that looks pretty good, okay? And this little funkiness right there, I don't know if you can see that, that's actually the watermark. Because when I was playing around with this yesterday, I realized it was just the watermark. Another thing I could use this, that makes sense, you guys? So what it's doing is it's doing exactly what it says. It's aware of the content around it. And it's going, oh, you want to get rid of that thing? I'll fill it with the stuff that's around it, so it looks, you know, just fills it in with based on the information all around it. Does that make sense? Okay. Really useful tool, especially if I was going to put something else here. Like anything I look in here, I don't really see too many bad parts in here. Let's zoom in. That's part of the watermark. Okay, so there's the watermark. Let's go. Boom. Edit. I'll show you more ways you can adjust that more later. I don't want to get into it now. And it got rid of it. Okay. So if I was comping something and I went and I grabbed a stock image that I don't want to pay for until later or whatever, I could go in and just get rid of the watermark if I wanted to. So let's look at this. We'll see if we can do that. So here's the watermark. Can you guys see that right across her right there? And you know, I'll go pay for stuff when I need to, but sometimes I'll pull something off the web and I go, I just want to comp this. I don't need to pay for it. Let's see if it'll do it. And we're going to fill content aware, not content aware fill. Not too bad. Yeah, not too bad. I'd have to tweak one little thing. Sometimes if you use the lasso tool instead of the marquee tool or vice versa, it'll make a difference on the selection. It's really easy to get rid of watermarks and things like this or like these. There's 2 watermarks right here, that one and that one. That it'll get rid of no problem, okay? If I was putting something in front of this, if I was going to change this and it was going to be a tiger or something in front of it, I don't really even have to repair that much of it back there if there's anything, because I'm going to cover it up anyway. Does that make sense? Let's try it. Let me see. I think I have one more. So let's take this one. Now let's use the lasso tool. Edit, fill, content aware. Done, right? Now I just got to go probably maybe get rid of that little bit of the shadow and I'm done. Does that make sense? Now, if there's little problems in there, like little artifacts left, then I just come in, I could use my clone stamp tool. I could use another tool I'm going to show you in a couple of seconds here, so on and so forth. Does that make sense? Okay. So here's a little bit more of an unretouched photo, okay? So now I'm going to go over here and this little spot healing brush, okay? And if I was going to come in here and clean up little things like blemishes and things like that, this is sort of like your clone stamp, but it's content aware, okay? So let's just go normal. Oh, that's good. Now I'm going to come in here and go, let's say this little mark here. All I'm doing is clicking them. I'm doing anything else. Now why is that working? Because it knows what's around it and it's sort of just filling in with the information around it, going, you know, knowing what's happening. So anything I want to take out of here, let's see if we can do this. Not too bad. Okay. And I can just keep going in here and just taking out whatever I want. And there's a million ways to use these things, you guys. You can really deep dive into all these tools. But you can see it's already cleaned up her face quite a bit. I might even come in here and even out that skin tone a little bit. Okay, so it's sort of like your, so here's the difference. When you're using your stamp tool, your clone stamp tool, remember we click an area and go, I want to clone that, right? And then it does this, right? So I go, okay, I know I'm pulling right from there and it's putting it over here, right? This is going, I just click it and it goes, let me look at everything around it. Okay, based on all that, this will fill that in correctly. Does that make sense? Really simple tool. Basically all you have to do is click on things and, you know, and it's called spot healing probably because I don't know how, it probably can't go. Like if we go here, hang on. Try and get rid of a nose. See, it gets a little weird, right?
You got Voldemort.
Huh?
It's nice. You got a female Voldemort.
Yeah, there you go. But, you know, if I was doing something like that, that's probably not the way I'd do it, but depends on what I'm doing. If I was doing certain things, I might use that as a starting point and then I go in and paint, okay? Or, you know, drop my, if I was going to put a different nose or something on here, I could just do that to kind of wipe it out, put whatever I'm doing in front of it, and then sort of spot heal certain areas. Or I could put whatever I'm going to replace it with in front of it and just spot heal the areas I'm seeing. Does that make sense? But it doesn't, it's not really made for like giant areas, okay? Look at, I only have one like exercise I want you guys to do today, and I think you'll probably get it done pretty quick. So let's look at these three tools now. I'm going to unlock this. And the three I want you to start playing with is under image, and it's easy to remember because you're adjusting your image, okay? I got to pick a layer. I'm going to go image. Let me copy this layer. By the way, you guys, you can go here and make a, see where this little folder is? You can go here and make a folder, name the group, and I could take these layers and I could throw it into that group folder. So if I'm working on, let's say, a background, I could make a folder, put all my background stuff in the folder for the background, all my, you know, foreground stuff, all my midground stuff, my characters, all in different folders. Does that make sense? It's very simple. You just make a folder, name it, drop your stuff in there, okay? For some reason, I'm a caveman and I tend not to use it. Okay, so let's go up to Image, Adjustments, and let's go to this first one, Brightness Contrast. So it's going to do and what I like about these and why they're so simple to talk about, don't worry about this use legacy thing, is that they're pretty, usually slider driven, and they're pretty simple. So if I want to brighten this up, I draw it over. If I want to darken it, I can pull it over this way, okay? If I want more contrast between the lights and the darks, I just pull it over this way. If I want less contrast, I want to blow it out a little bit, over that way. Does that make sense? So that's your brightness contrast. We're going to be using these quite a bit really quickly. And then we're going to go back to Image, Adjustments, and we're going to go to Levels. Okay, now, what this is showing you here is your darks, your mids, and your lights, okay? And I'm going to show you another little overlay thing with this, if I can find a drawing real quick. Don't Don't worry about this yet. So if I want to pull up, I'm pulling the darks up. You see that? Okay. If I want to go in and I want to lighten or darken the mids, I can do that. This is a really handy tool, by the way. And if I want to pump the lights, I can come over here and really pump the lights. So it lets me just go in, and I use this constantly. Like almost every time I take a photo, especially if I take a photo. If I take a photo, I've got to heavily Photoshop it for the most part. Unless it's just like something for, you know, social media or whatever, who cares then? I'll just filter it or whatever. But if I'm going to take a photo for like something at work or something like that, I've got to Photoshop the living hell out of it because I'm not a good photographer. Does that make sense? And most things that I look at, I'll look at and I'll probably do something with the levels, and I might do something with this tool. So if I go to Image, Adjustments again, and I go right here, Hue Saturation or Command U, it gives me 3 sliders. Now I use this all the time especially when I'm painting or creating an image. If I pull this slider here, Hue, which is color, and I pull it over, it goes right through the color spectrum. Okay, so what I tend to do with this a lot, if I'm painting or something, if I put a color down or like an overlay or something like that, I might at some point go and pull this up and then go through the spectrum and see if there's anything in there I like better than the color I picked. Does that make sense? Okay. Or I'll just tweak it a little bit, or I'll go, well, that just doesn't look good. It should be green or whatever. Okay. The next one down, so that just rolls through your color spectrum. The next one down does exactly what it says. It saturates or desaturates. So I can pull it all the way over here and overly saturate it. I can pull it all the way over here and it goes to black and white because I've completely desaturated it. Does that make sense? I use that a lot on photography in general, and I use it all the time on scans of my work because it just tends to sort of just lose a little color, okay, in the scan. And then what I usually tend to do, it just sort of happens, if I scan like an illustration or something, I'll tend to juice it just a little bit more because it usually just looks a little nicer on the screen, juiced a little harder. Does that make sense? With a little more saturation. Does that make sense? Yeah? Okay. Okay, and the last one is lightness or darkness. I hardly ever use this. If I'm going to be playing around with the lightness or darkness, I'm probably going to go to levels. Okay? So those 3 that we want to think about are image, adjustments, brightness, contrast, levels, or hue saturation. Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay, so now let's look at one more thing that's in hue saturation because it's a really, really useful tool. If I want to make this whole thing a monochromatic, let's say red, because I have red here, there's another little trick in here. So I'm going to go to Image, Adjustment, Hue Saturation, and then right here there's a little button that says Colorize. Okay? If I click that button, what it's going to do is it's going to use this foreground swatch. So let's click it. And it made the whole thing that color. Does that make sense? It's a little dull on that screen. On my screen, it's a lot redder. Does that make sense, you guys? That's a really useful tool, okay? So if I want to do this sort of duotone idea, I could do that with this. I could do it now. Let's take that other guy. What do I do with it? Let me see. I don't know if I saved it. Oh, here it is. Let's take this guy and let's flatten him. I'm going to flatten this whole thing. So I picked all these layers. Remember, we have a flyout menu on all our palettes, and I'm going to go down here and go merge layers. So now it's flat. So now I'm going to go here and I'm going to go, let's try something different. Let's go, I'm going to adjust this maybe into like a sepia tone color. Get a little more orange. Maybe a little darker, or maybe about, let's just try that. Now I'm going to go Command U, or Control U, because that'll bring up my hue saturation, and I'm going to go Colorize. And now it just took it in. I'm going to saturate it a little more. And now I would probably go back again and grab my paper texture, because now I'm sort of starting to do a sepia tone idea. And I'm not going to desaturate the paper this time. Let's just see what it does. Now I'm going to right click this because it turned it into a smart object, rasterize layer. And I could start to get like a nice old sepia looking image doing this. That's actually kind of cool right there. So if I wanted to, like, you know, you see those sepia photos from like the Old West and all that kind of stuff. I could use this kind of technique to create that. By the way, if I got this texture, let's say I liked something about this texture, but it was too heavy duty, like maybe it was too heavy duty on the face or something like that. I'm trying to get it to work like that. You know, another thing I could do, this is on its own layer, I could come in here with my eraser, get a soft brush, make it, and just made it a soft brush, big brush. Oops, I screwed up. Big brush, and then right here under opacity, I'm going to lower the opacity on my brush way down. And then I can just sort of erase some of that out so the texture's not hitting his face as much. It's just hitting what I want and putting a real emphasis right there on his face. Does that make sense? Okay, all really simple tools, okay? And by the way, I can go out right now, if we walk down the street, I could find 15 examples of this, probably, okay? Does that make sense? Okay, now let's go to the thing I want to do today. Questions? Everybody's good? Okay. Because we're going to be using this on Monday. We're going to start a real simple color correct or a photo correction thing.
On Wednesday, you mean?
Wednesday, I'm sorry. I'm still trying to find out if we're even open on Saturday, because I have a Saturday class and I never am quite sure if it's actually open. Okay, so let's grab, hopefully, I didn't put it in here, hang on. By the way, I'll show you something else here in a minute, but it's just kind of, I might show you that when we start doing the poster project. Hang on, let me grab, I forgot to download the ones I gave you guys. I do it like this. So these things are docked. You guys can see this. They're docked into the dock, right? I just usually pull it off like that, the one I want to pull in, and I just grab with my move tool and pull it into the next file. And I don't need this anymore, okay? So this isn't quite big enough, so I'm going to go Command T. I don't need to hold Shift to constrain it anymore. And then I'm going to unlock this girl image. I'm going to pull this cloud underneath her. I'm going to go here to this one, and this will make sense in a minute. I'm going to desaturate, or I'm going to knock down the opacity so I can see my bottom layer. And then sometimes, like, I won't be able to grab that bottom layer because it's going to want to keep grabbing the top layer. So I'm going to go to the bottom layer and go Command T, because then it's grabbing that layer. And I want to put the clouds like that. And I'm going to stretch them, which I normally wouldn't do, but whatever. Okay, and then I'm going to go back to here, and then I'm going to go back to 100% opacity. Okay, then I'm going to, okay, so now I'm on this layer, and now I'm going to click this little thing called Layer Mask. Okay, it's down here at the bottom of your, oh, there's one other thing I want to talk about today too. I'm going to click that, and it made a little mask right here. That's that little image, okay, that little white image. Then I'm going to go to my brush. I'm going to get a really soft brush. I think it's still, I want to make sure it's a really soft brush. So I can go here, here's a soft brush, and I can scroll through all these different brushes. Okay, there's not very many in here, we got to add some, but I want a soft brush. And then I'm going to go kind of big, make this brush bigger, not that big. And then I'm going to go again up to my opacity on my brush, and I'm going to really pull it down. And then the one thing I want to do is right here, we have these two little foreground, background things, I want to set those to make sure the black and white. And I'm going to put black forward. And then I'm going to take my brush and I'm going to start revealing those clouds underneath her. You see, this is another thing you see constantly in like movie posters and stuff like that. And then I go, well, I don't like it so much of that on her hair. Now I'm going to make my, see, I went too far out. So now I'm going to make my brush a little smaller. If I was going to get her whole face in here, let's say, okay? And the reason I'm doing this with a not totally opaque brush is because otherwise it's just going to go boom and it's going to pull it all out too fast, okay? I want to build it, okay? Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to either hit X or hit this little arrow thing right here to put my white, make white my foreground color, and I'm going to go back to my brush again and go, I don't want it in her hair. So I'm going to start painting that back out again. So here's what you got to remember when you're using this tool. And then I'm going to go over here and go, well, I overshot it right there. See that? I'm going to go to my brush again, make it smaller, and now white conceals, black reveals, right? I'm going to paint that back. So this gives me a lot of flexibility in how I'm doing this thing. See, I just accidentally hit that, so I want to make sure I zero that back to white. And then if I hit my, when I'm up close like this, if I hit my space bar, I can automatically get my little move tool, or my hand tool. And then I'm going to go back to my brush again, because there's some overspray here, and I'm going to get rid of that here. And I can just really dial it in. I've got all, and what you got to remember is you're not erasing. You're painting something in or you're painting something out. So if you look over here at your the little mask, you can see what I painted out. It's like a stencil. Does that make sense? Now, when somebody showed me this, it was one of those things where I was like, what is this dark magic? I don't get it. You know, for some reason I didn't get it. Okay, that's just me. Because she kept going, you don't paint, you're not erasing it, you're painting it in or painting it out. And again, this is how my brain works, okay? The way I had to think of this is I go, oh, okay, I've created a stencil, right? So I've cut out a mask out of that stencil, but now I can magically paint the mask out again. I can make it solid again. So it's like, in my brain, it's like I got a stencil and then I can paint the material back into the stencil. That's just how I have to think of it, okay? So I'm painting the mask in or out. I'm not erasing. Does that make sense? Yeah? Okay, so look, here's one other thing. And then I want to do this little exercise. Let's say now that we have this and we like it. Okay, so now let's start talking about non-destructive editing, okay? Which means I don't want to go on here, like we just talked about the levels, the brightness, contrast, and the levels, brightness, contrast, and hue, saturation, okay? If I'm going to apply those, if I go to this layer right here that I'm working on and I do it, I'm kind of stuck with those changes, right? Or I can, and we're going to start doing this with all the tools that we can. If you go right down here, so we just talked about layer mask is right there, right next to, okay, then you have your, what we're going to talk about right now, and then you have your folders, you want to create a folder, then you have your create a new layer, which we've already used, and then you have your delete layer. So right here, this is your layer adjustments. So if I go, well, I want to saturate this, I can click it and it'll give me this, and it gives me kind of those standard tools, right? So here's hue, saturation. So I'm going to go, well, I want to saturate this. And I'm going to lighten it up. And I'm going to change the whatever. I'm going to change that. Okay, that's that. And then I'm going to go, well, I also want to adjust the levels, the tools we just talked about. I'm going to go to levels. I want to push the darks and maybe pull up the lights. Then I come tomorrow and I go, wow, this is a train wreck, right? Because I'll look at it tomorrow and go, this is oversaturated, it's a mess, okay? But I can come back in here and I can start readjusting again, okay? I don't have that option when I just apply it to the actual image. And if I go in here and go, that's a total mess, I can just take this and drag it into the trash can, and I can just start over. Does that make sense? So we're always, from here on out, I'm going to start trying to show you the non-destructive way of doing things. Does that make sense? Yes? Man, everybody's quiet today. Yeah? All right, so I want to do this little layer mask exercise, okay? That's the only thing I want to accomplish today. Because on Monday, or Wednesday, we're going to start a correction thing and we're going to use all these tools. Does that make sense? Okay, so let's do it.